Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, the children of sin. A case opens in Brussels as several mixed-race Congolese women sue Belgium for reparations for crimes against humanity. They're some of the thousands of babies born of African women and white men during colonialism. The children were taken from their homes and forced into orphanages. Also, there's shock and sadness over the violent death of one of Kenya's brightest sports stars. Police are still searching for the husband of Olympic athlete Agnes Chirchirs after she was found stabbed to death at her home this week. And a military officer's lynched by a mob in Cameroon southwest after he fired on a car at a checkpoint and killed a little girl, allegedly after her parents refused to pay a bribe. The city of Buea erupts into protest soon afterwards. But first, 5 mixed-race women taken from their mothers in DR Congo as children have gone to court after suing Belgium for crimes against humanity and asking for reparations. The trial's the first of its kind. About 15,000 biracial children were forcibly separated from their black mothers in the former Belgian colonies of DR Congo, Rwanda and Burundi. They were called children of sin and dumped in orphanages by the state.
Prior to June 2020, these women had never spoken publicly about their traumatic past. Now in their 70s, the 5 are part of a group known as the Métis, children born to African mothers fathered by Belgian colonizers between 1908 and 1960. According to legal documents, they were aged between 2 and 4 when they were snatched from their families and placed in religious institutions and homes by Belgian authorities, a fate suffered by thousands of mixed-race children in Congo, Rwanda and Burundi. After Congo won independence in 1960, while other Métis children were sent to Belgium, the 5 plaintiffs were left behind in the unstable Kasai region, where they suffered abuses at the hands of local militias. Today, they still want to know why they were abandoned by the Belgian state, which they called Papa l'État.
Abandonner un enfant pendant la guerre, c'est pourquoi. Avec l'espoir qu'on va les tuer, on ne va plus parler d'eux. Papa l'État nous avait arrachés pour nous faire souffrir, ou il avait quel but, on ne sait pas.
Il faut quand même que nous, du vivant, qu'on puisse savoir ce que nous pouvons aussi dire à nos enfants. On vient d'où?
In 2019, the Belgian government made an official apology, but the plaintiffs want the Belgian state to recognize the acts as crimes against humanity. They've requested compensation of €50,000 each. They say it's not a question of money, but of obtaining a concrete response in order to recognize the acts in the Belgian Congo as crimes.
And police in Kenya have arrested the husband of an Olympic athlete and record-breaking runner who was found stabbed to death in her home this week. 25-year-old Agnes Chirchirs was a 2-time World Championship bronze medalist who smashed the women's 10K world record in Germany just last month. Her husband, Ibrahim Rotic, is the main suspect in her killing. The World Athletics president, Lord Sebastian Coe, said that she was one of her sport's brightest stars. Her friends, family and fans are distraught over her death.
When we got the news, it was really saddening because Agnes has been a good person since she was young, and Agnes has never been to any conflict with anyone. So having been killed really got us with surprise.
Nilipata huzuni sana kwa juu ya mtoto yangu nilipoteza, na yeye alikuwa anafanya kazi mingi hapa. Tena yeye alikuwa anasaidia watoto ya shule kulipia fees. Hata mimi ninategemea yeye.
Huyu rafiki wangu ametuaja kwa njia nyingine ambayo imetutatanisha sisi wote. Hatukubali kwamba Agnes Chirchirs ambaye tulikuwa tunatarajia na maombi zetu kila siku afanye mazuri kwa Kenya mzima, imefika mwisho wake wa kumalizwa hivyo. Hatukupenda.
Sasa Agnes ndio alikuwa tegemeo letu. We as the family athletes hatujui tutafanya nini. It's so painful for that guy to murder our sister. Na tunaomba serikali wa make sure huyu jamaa amekamatwa.
A military officer was lynched by a mob in Cameroon southwest on Thursday after he fired on a car at a checkpoint and killed a little girl. The city of Buea erupted into protest soon after, with demonstrators marching the body of Caro Louise Indiale to the governor's office. Many of those who took to the streets waved 500-franc notes, which is about 75 euro cents, the amount witnesses claim the girl's parents refused to pay as a bribe before the gendarme opened fire. There's growing frustration in the community over security forces repeatedly harassing civilians. Claudia Masono tells us more.
Disturbing images that emerged on social media this morning showed an irate mob in Buea, chief town of Cameroon's restive southwest region, lynching a gendarmerie officer while his colleague watched helplessly. It is still unclear what the details are, but according to eyewitnesses, the officer opened fire on a car, killing a 5-year-old. Bystanders say that the child's mother was driving her 3 kids to school at the time. The incident has since spiraled into citywide protest, with demonstrators demanding an end to overzealousness and fatally careless overstepping by those that are meant to protect the community. The Defense Ministry has confirmed the death of the gendarmerie officer and announced that investigations have been opened. Thursday's incident shows that we are still very far from seeing an end to tensions in Anglophone Cameroon, where clashes between state forces and armed militiamen have led to the death of over 4,000 people and displacement of over 700,000 others since late 2016.
Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta met with US leader Joe Biden in Washington on Thursday. The US has said it will donate 17 million doses of Johnson & Johnson COVID vaccines to the African Union, of which Kenyatta is the chair. The continent lags behind much of the world in vaccinations. Now, the meeting was Biden's first face-to-face with an African leader since he took office last year. Catherine Gorgistani joins us with more. Ket, what did they talk about?
Well, as you mentioned, of course, COVID was really top of the agenda with that announcement by Joe Biden with those 17 million doses of J&J, for which the Kenyan president thanked the United States, thanking them for helping the African continent. There was also much talk about counterterrorism efforts, because Kenya is a big partner of the United States for counterterrorism in the region. And there was, of course, talk of the situation in Ethiopia. There was a press briefing right after that bilateral meeting where the press secretary didn't want to get too much into the details of what exactly they discussed. The question here in Washington is the fact that the United States has said that they were ready to put sanctions on some of the leaders involved in the conflict in Ethiopia. But so far, the Americans are not going forward with those sanctions. And she was asked whether there had been discussions with the Kenyan president about possibly moving forward with the sanctions. No answer there, but Ethiopia and the situation, the security situation in the region, of course, was really a huge part of their discussions. We might get a little bit more information later on about that, but the situation in Ethiopia, of course, very important both for Kenya but also for the African Union as a whole.
Now, this is the first time that Biden's had an African leader in Washington since he took office earlier this year. Any insight as to whether Kenyatta was there more in his role as chair of the African Union or as president of Kenya?
Well, there are three main reasons for his decision to invite Uhuru Kenyatta. Of course, he is the chair of the African Union right now, and that was a very big part of it. The other thing, which I mentioned, is the tight partnership between the United States and Kenya as far as counterterrorism goes in the region and on the African continent as a whole. But also, Kenya is currently holding the rotating seat at the UN Security Council for the month of October, and Uhuru Kenyatta was in New York, was at the UN talking about the situation in Ethiopia. So that was also part of the thinking here at the White House for why this was going to be the first meeting for Joe Biden with an African leader, with Uhuru Kenyatta. So Kenya, African Union, and the UN Security Council, all three coming into question here.
Great. So he's sitting really there at a crossroads of a lot of influence. Thanks so much, Catherine Gorgistani, there for us in Washington. Now, Cape Verde is just days away from presidential elections. The country's been battered by a huge contraction in GDP because of the pandemic. It's also seeing a spike in inflation. A record 7 candidates are in the running. And although the stakes are high, the electorate is sure of a smooth vote. That's because the country's never seen any electoral violence and is ranked second for governance in Africa. Our correspondents tell us more.
Jose Maria Neves is a front-runner in Cape Verde's presidential elections. The left-wingers met with his young supporters at a nightclub rented out for the rally. Well-known singers whip up a party mood, but political debate is also on the agenda. Kevin's keen on the candidate.
The campaign is going smoothly. In my district, everything is going peacefully, in harmony and humility.
Conservative Carlos Vega is the other big favourite. He's also prepared an evening rally in the last stretch before the vote.
The campaigning is going well, just as we like it.
Cape Verde is proud of a 30-year legacy of peaceful democracy. Former President Pedro Pires says that leaders must respect the limitations of office. He coolly stepped down in 2011 at the end of a 2-term limit and won the Mo Ibrahim Prize, which rewards heads of state with a flawless record.
There is a life outside of power. If you accept that, everything else is easier. But if you think that losing power is a catastrophe, it's very complicated.
Limited military influence in Cape Verde also plays into its history of smooth transfers of power.
The military has never had a lot of power, whereas in other countries, the military has great control over decision-making.
Both Vega and Neves are former prime ministers. Altogether, there are 7 independent candidates in the running.
Well, that's it for Eye on Africa for now. Thanks for joining us. Do so again if you can. Take care.